Welcome to my channel. Today, we're tackling a story that stirs up some of the deepest questions in the Bible, the story of Lot and his daughters. Was their action a sin, or was it a desperate act of survival? We're going to explore the biblical text, dive into the cultural context, and consider the spiritual lessons this story offers. Stick with me as we examine every angle of this fascinating tale. Our story begins in the ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, places the Bible describes as filled with sin and moral decay. According to Genesis 18 and 19, God sent two angels to warn Lot and his family to flee because the city's sins had reached a breaking point. The angels urged Lot to leave quickly, and after much hesitation, Lot, his wife, and his two daughters fled the city. Here's where things take a tragic turn. As they're escaping, Lot's wife looks back at Sodom, disobeying the angel's command, and she's turned into a pillar of salt. Lot and his daughters continue alone, making their way to a secluded cave in the mountains, traumatized and uncertain of what lies ahead. Now Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains with his two daughters, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, and he lived in a cave, he and his two daughters. Then the firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man on the earth to come to us as is the custom of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father." Genesis 19 verses 30 to 32. Let's pause and break this down. Lot's daughters have just lost their mother, their home, and nearly everyone they've ever known. They've fled to the mountains and likely feel completely isolated from the rest of the world. They're convinced they might be the last people on Earth, and in their desperation to continue their family line, they come up with a disturbing plan to get their father intoxicated and sleep with him. This isn't an easy passage to process, and it's made even more complex by the fact that the Bible doesn't explicitly label it as a sin. So, what's really going on here? To understand their motivation, we need to consider the cultural context. In ancient societies, family lineage was everything. For Lot's daughters, preserving their family line wasn't just about heritage, it was a matter of survival and duty. In a world where patriarchal lineage was seen as an inheritance and blessing, being cut off meant not only disgrace but also vulnerability and even extinction. Now, that doesn't mean what they did was morally right. But this background can help us understand why they might have felt so desperate. In their eyes, they were alone and abandoned in a desolate world. We might even wonder if Sodom's influence lingered in their minds, leading them to a decision that strayed from God's plan. Later in the Bible, particularly in Leviticus, we see clear prohibitions against incest. God's law established that close family relationships were sacred and meant to be honored with clear boundaries. This story, however, takes place long before those laws were written down. Some theologians argue that while Lot's daughters' actions weren't explicitly condemned here, they were clearly outside God's design for family. It's almost as if this story was left in the Bible without moral commentary as a mirror, reflecting humanity's brokenness back to us and urging us to consider the consequences of choices born out of fear. Lot's role in this story is also worth examining. Why was Lot, a man known as righteous enough to be saved from Sodom, getting drunk to the point of not realizing what was happening? Lot's choices in Genesis often reflect a compromised character, someone deeply affected by the corrupt culture of Sodom. Even after being saved by God, he hesitates, showing how powerful negative influences can be. His daughters likely saw a father who was morally weakened, vulnerable, and perhaps not one to turn to for guidance. Now, here's where the story takes an interesting twist. The children born from Lot's daughters became the ancestors of the Moabites and Ammonites, two nations that had a complicated relationship with Israel. At times, they were enemies of Israel, but in other moments, we see glimpses of redemption. Ruth, the Moabite woman, becomes the great-grandmother of King David, placing her in the direct lineage of Jesus. This unexpected lineage is a powerful testament to God's ability to redeem even the most difficult situations. It's a reminder that God's plans aren't thwarted by human mistakes. Instead, He weaves even our brokenness into His greater purpose. So, what can we learn from Lot and his daughters? At the core, this story is about the dangers of acting out of fear and desperation rather than faith. While the Bible doesn't explicitly label their actions as sinful, it's clear that this isn't God's ideal for family or humanity. Their decision, however understandable, had lasting consequences. Let's take a moment to reflect on this. Have you ever faced a moment when fear or desperation led you to make a decision that you later regretted? This story serves as a reminder that God is with us, even in our most desperate times. He calls us to trust Him, to lean into His promises, rather than take matters into our own hands. To wrap up, was it a sin? It's a complex question. Maybe it was left in Scripture to remind us of humanity's need for God's wisdom, especially when we feel isolated or afraid. This story encourages us to rely on God, not on our own understanding. So now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Do you see this story as a moral lesson, a reflection on culture, or a message about God's sovereignty? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of the Bible's most challenging stories. If you enjoyed this discussion, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our future videos. And remember to leave a comment below. Let's keep the conversation going. Faith is a journey, and your insights could help someone else along the way. Until next time, keep seeking, keep asking, and may God's peace be with you.